The orange glow of plasma fire lit up the darkness of space as another Federation ship exploded. Captain James Reed gripped the arms of his command chair aboard the Star Wanderer, his knuckles turning white as he watched the battle unfold. The merchant ship's sensors showed 15 refugee vessels still trying to escape the research outpost, their engines straining as they fled from the approaching swarm. "Captain, 3 more swarm ships breaking through Sector 7. His sensor officer Tom shouted. The man's voice cracked with fear as the biomechanical horrors pushed past the Federation's defensive line. Reed's jaw clenched. The Star Wanderer wasn't built for combat. She was a simple cargo hauler that had been drafted into this evacuation effort. Her hull plates were thin, her engines were made for steady burning rather than combat maneuvers, and her only weapons were 2 small point defense turrets. How many civilians still on the outpost? Reed asked, keeping his voice steady despite the chaos around them. He had to stay calm. His crew needed that from him. About 3,000, sir, his communications officer replied. The last shuttles are launching now. But she didn't finish the sentence. They all knew there weren't enough ships to save everyone. Through the main viewport, Reed could see the Federation warships fighting a losing battle. Their weapons seemed to barely scratch the chitinous armor of the swarm vessels. The enemy ships looked like massive insects made of metal and bone, their organic mechanical hybrid design unlike anything humanity had seen before. A Federation cruiser, its blue hull scared and burning, moved to block 3 swarm ships from reaching the refugee convoy. The cruiser's weapons blazed, scoring hits against the lead swarm vessel. But the damage was superficial, and the swarm's response was devastating. Tentacles of energy lashed out, cutting through the cruiser's shields like they weren't even there. The proud ship split apart in a spectacular explosion. Sir, Tom called out again. 2 swarm fighters on intercept course. Reed quickly assessed his options. The Star Wanderer couldn't outrun them, couldn't outfight them, and couldn't outmaneuver them. But she could buy time. All power to the rear shields, he ordered. Plot a course between those fighters and the nearest refugee ship. His crew looked at him with understanding in their eyes. They knew what this meant. The Star Wanderer shuddered as her engines pushed her into harm's way. The refugee ship, packed with civilians, limped toward the jump point. If Reed could buy them even a few minutes, some of those people might survive. The first hits from the swarm fighters rocked the ship. Warning alarms blared as the shield started to fail. Reed watched the power readings drop and calculated they might survive another 30 seconds. Maybe 40 if they were lucky. Sir, his communications officer suddenly called out. I'm picking up a transmission. It's from Earth. Reed's head snapped around. Earth. The human homeworld had sealed itself off decades ago after the First Contact War. They never responded to calls for aid, never involved themselves in galactic politics. The Federation had honored their wish to be left alone, keeping their space clear of all traffic. Put it through, Reed ordered. The message was short, text only. We remember our promise. Hold position. Reed stared at the words, not understanding. A promise? What promise? The ship rocked again as another blast from the swarm fighters struck home. Shields at 12%, engineering reported. The Star Wanderer's structural integrity was failing. Hull breaches were reported on decks 3 through 5. The refugee ship they were protecting was almost at the jump point, but the swarm fighters would still catch them before they could escape. That's when Reed saw it. At first, he thought the flash was another explosion, another Federation ship dying. But this was different. Space itself seemed to tear open, creating a massive hole in the fabric of reality. His sensor officer shouted something about power readings going off the scale. Through that impossible tear in space came a ship, a human ship. It was enormous, dwarfing even the largest Federation vessels. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in weapons unlike anything Reed had ever seen. It moved with impossible grace for something its size, and its presence alone made the swarm fighters pause their attack. A new message appeared on Reed's screen, this one from the human vessel. "This is AMS Thunderchild. To all Federation ships, clear the battle space." For the first time since the battle began, Reed smiled. He didn't know why Earth had finally decided to join the fight, but he knew one thing for certain. The swarm was about to learn why humans had a reputation for being the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Thunderchild's arrival had frozen the battlefield in shock. Even the swarm ships seemed to pause, their biomechanical forms hovering in space, as if studying this new arrival. Reed's crew stared at their screens in disbelief, their earlier fear replaced by wonder. "Captain," Tom said, his voice barely a whisper, "the power readings from that ship, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. Their reactor output is beyond our ability to measure." The Star Wanderer's damage control systems beeped urgently, reminding them all that they were still in danger. Smoke filled the bridge from damaged consoles, and the hull groaned under the strain of multiple breaches. But Reed couldn't take his eyes off the massive human warship. He remembered the stories from his grandfather, tales of the First Contact War 30 years ago. Humanity had been attacked by raiders from a now extinct alien race. Earth's response had been swift and absolute. They had wiped out the attackers completely. After that, humanity had sealed their borders and gone silent. The Federation had respected their wish for isolation, marking Earth's solar system as restricted space. A new transmission cut through his thoughts. "Federation vessels, this is Admiral Wilson of the Thunderchild. Begin immediate withdrawal to safe distance. We will handle the swarm." The voice was calm, almost casual, as if they weren't in the middle of a losing battle. The swarm responded first. 3 of their largest ships broke away from attacking the refugee convoy and turned their weapons on the Thunderchild. Energy tentacles, the same weapons that had torn apart Federation ships with ease, lashed out at the human vessel. Reed held his breath, expecting to see the massive ship torn apart. Instead, the energy weapons seemed to vanish a few meters from the Thunderchild's hull, absorbed by an invisible barrier that rippled like water in sunlight. "All Federation ships, clear the area now," the Thunderchild transmitted again. "Weapons free in 30 seconds. Reed didn't wait for a third warning. "Get us out of here," he ordered his helm officer. The Star Wanderer's engines protested but pushed the damaged ship away from the confrontation. Through their rear cameras, they watched as the Thunderchild opened fire. But instead of conventional weapons, the human ship released what looked like small tears in space itself. The swarm ships caught in these anomalies began to twist and break apart, their hybrid organic mechanical structures unable to withstand whatever forces were being applied. "Sir," his science officer called out, "I'm picking up massive gravitational distortions. They're using gravity as a weapon." The swarm ships tried to retreat, showing fear for the first time since the battle began. But the Thunderchild wasn't finished. New weapons emerged from its hull, beams of light that didn't so much destroy their targets as erase them from existence. Reed's communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we're receiving a general broadcast from Earth. They're explaining why they stayed isolated all these years." The message played through the bridge speakers. It was a simple explanation that made Reed's blood run cold. Earth had detected the swarm decades ago, long before they reached Federation space. Instead of warning everyone, they had chosen to prepare in secret. Every year of isolation had been spent developing weapons specifically designed to combat the swarm's biological and technological advantages. "We made a promise after the First Contact War," the message continued. "We promised ourselves that we would never again be caught unprepared. We promised that we would protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Today, we keep that promise." More tiers in space appeared around the battlefield. More human ships emerged, each as impressive as the Thunderchild. The swarm fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago, now broke formation and began a chaotic retreat. Reed watched as decades of human advancement and preparation were unveiled in a single battle. The Federation had thought Earth was hiding in fear. Instead, they had been preparing for this exact moment. developing technologies that seemed to break the laws of physics themselves. A final message came through from the Thunderchild. To all Federation forces, this is just the beginning. Earth stands with you now. Reed looked at his battered bridge, at his brave crew, and felt something he hadn't felt since the swarm first appeared. Hope. Admiral Wilson stood on the Thunderchild's command deck, his hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the swarm fleet regroup. The enemy ships clustered together like angry insects, their biomechanical forms pulsing with strange energy. Around him, the bridge crew worked at stations that would have looked alien to Federation eyes. Controls that manipulated gravity, time, and space itself. They're preparing for another attack, his tactical officer reported. Swarm signatures show they're adapting their shields based on our first strike. Wilson nodded. The swarm were known for their ability to evolve and adapt during battle. But humanity had spent 30 years preparing for this. Deploy the phase nets, he ordered. Let's show them why we call this ship Thunderchild. Massive arrays unfolded from the warship's hull, spreading out like silvery webs in space. The nearby Federation ships, still retreating to safe distance, watched in awe as these structures began to glow with strange light. On the Star Wanderer, Captain Reed and his crew observed the battle from what they hoped was a safe distance. Their sensors could barely make sense of what they were seeing. The human ship, Tom reported. It's doing something to the structure of space itself. The swarm launched their counterattack. Hundreds of smaller ships broke from the main fleet, their weapons modified to match the frequency of the Thunderchild's shields. Behind them, larger vessels charged weapons that could tear apart normal ships with ease. But the Thunderchild wasn't a normal ship. As the swarm fighters entered range of the phase nets, space itself seemed to thicken. The enemy ships slowed, as if trying to fly through honey. Some of them began to break apart, their hybrid technology unable to handle the altered physics around them. Target their command ship, Wilson ordered. Temporal lance, full power. A weapon unlike anything the Federation had ever seen emerged from the Thunderchild's bow. It looked like a spear made of light and darkness twisted together. When it fired, it didn't travel through space. It bent space around itself. The swarm command ship, a massive creature machine hybrid the size of a small moon, tried to evade. But the temporal lance struck true. Where it hit, time itself went wrong. Parts of the ship aged 1,000 years in seconds, while others reversed back to their raw materials. The mighty vessel fell apart, its pieces scattered across both space and time. The remaining swarm ships reacted with visible panic, their movements becoming erratic. But Wilson wasn't finished. Launch the gravity bombs, he commanded. Break their formation. Small, dark spheres shot out from the Thunderchild's launch tubes. Where they detonated, localized gravity wells formed, powerful enough to crush swarm ships into balls of compressed matter. The enemy fleet scattered, their usual coordinated movements replaced by chaos. On the Star Wanderer, Reed watched in amazement as decades of human military advancement unveiled itself. His communication officer intercepted fragments of chatter between swarm ships. For the first time ever, the enemy was showing fear. "Sir," Tom called out, "more rifts opening. 3, no, 5 more human ships." The new arrivals were different from the Thunderchild, each seemingly designed for a specific role. One looked like it was made of mirrors and light, its surface bending sensor readings around it. Another trailed what looked like clouds of glowing dust that ate through swarm bio-armor like acid. Wilson allowed himself a small smile as his reinforcements arrived. All ships implement attack pattern Delta. Show them why humanity stayed quiet for so long. The human warships moved in perfect coordination, their advanced weapons transforming the battlefield into a killing ground. Space rippled and warped around them as gravity weapons crushed swarm ships, temporal fields reduced others to dust, and phase beams bypassed shields completely. Reed couldn't help but think about how the galaxy had misunderstood Earth's silence. They hadn't been hiding. They had been preparing, advancing. building weapons specifically designed to counter the swarm's greatest strengths. A final transmission came from the Thunderchild. To all Federation forces, observe and record. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity stands ready to defend civilization itself. We are not alone anymore. The message was punctuated by another barrage from the human fleet's weapons, turning the darkness of space into a canvas of destruction. The swarm, who had terrorized the galaxy for so long, were learning a harsh lesson about humanity's true power. The swarm's retreat had turned into a rout. Their remaining ships tried to escape through their own version of faster-than-light travel, creating organic-looking tiers in space. But the human fleet wasn't about to let them escape to threaten other worlds. Target their jump points, Admiral Wilson commanded. Deploy the anchor fields. The Thunderchild and its sister ships released streams of silvery energy that wrapped around the swarm's escape routes. The organic wormholes collapsed, trapping the enemy fleet in normal space. Several swarm ships were caught in the collapsing jump points, their massive forms twisted and broken by the competing forces. Reed watched from the Star Wanderer as the Federation's most dreaded enemy faced extinction. His ship's medical bay was full of wounded crew members, but everyone who could still move had found their way to viewing stations. They needed to see this, needed to understand that the galaxy had changed forever. "Captain," Tom called from his sensor station, "I'm picking up some kind of transmission between the swarm ships. It's different from their usual communications." Reed moved to look at the sensor readings. The swarm normally communicated through quantum-entangled signals that were impossible to intercept. But now they were broadcasting on open channels, their messages filled with something no one had ever detected from them before: panic. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Wilson received a surprising report. "Sir, we're being hailed by the swarm. They're attempting to communicate directly." "Put it through," Wilson ordered. "Let's hear what they have to say." The message came through as a mix of mechanical and organic sounds that the ship's computers translated into words. "What are you? How do you bend reality itself? Why did you wait until now?" Wilson's response was calm, but carried the weight of 30 years of preparation. "We are humanity. We bend reality because we refuse to accept its limitations, and we waited because we needed to be certain we could end this threat permanently." The swarm ships tried one final desperate tactic. They began to merge together, their biomechanical forms melding into one massive entity. It was their ultimate evolution, something they had never been pushed to attempt before. "That's what we were waiting for," Wilson said with grim satisfaction. "All ships, execute final protocol." The human fleet moved into a precise formation. Energy began to flow between their ships, connecting them in a complex web of power. The Thunderchild led the pattern, its massive form becoming the focal point for whatever weapon they were preparing to unleash. On the Star Wanderer, alarms began to sound. "Captain," Tom shouted, "they're doing something to the fabric of space-time itself. These readings, they're off any scale I've ever seen." Reed keyed his comm. "All hands, brace for possible space-time distortion. Secure all stations." The human ships fired as one, but instead of destructive energy, they released a wave of pure law, fundamental rules of physics made manifest. Where this wave touched the combined swarm entity, natural laws reasserted themselves with absolute authority. The hybrid organic-mechanical form couldn't exist under such rigid physics. It began to break apart, not through violence, but through the simple impossibility of its own existence. The swarm's final form collapsed in on itself, its components separating and dissolving as base physics refused to accept its impossible nature. In moments, the mighty enemy that had terrorized the galaxy was reduced to scattered atoms. Admiral Wilson opened a channel to all ships in the area. "Let this be understood," he broadcast. "Humanity withdrew from galactic affairs not out of fear, but out of necessity. We needed time to develop weapons that didn't just destroy enemies, but denied them the ability to exist. Today marks the end of the swarm and the beginning of a new era of protection for all peaceful species. Reed looked at his crew, seeing the same expression of awe on every face. The Federation had fought the swarm for years with conventional weapons, never realizing that the key to victory wasn't to match their evolution, but to enforce rules they couldn't evolve around. As debris from the battle slowly drifted through space, Reed understood that everything had changed. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had completely transformed the nature of warfare itself, and somehow that made him more hopeful than afraid. The Star Wanderer's engines hummed quietly as the ship approached the Thunderchild. Reed had received a direct invitation from Admiral Wilson to come aboard, along with other Federation ship captains. As his shuttle entered the human warship's landing bay, he finally saw up close just how different human technology had become. The bay walls seemed to shift and move, not through mechanical means, but as if the metal itself was fluid. Gun turrets tracked the incoming shuttle, but they looked more like sculpted glass than weapons. Everything about the ship spoke of technology so advanced it appeared magical. Wilson met them in a conference room that could have easily fit Reed's entire ship inside it. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen more than most could imagine. Around the room, holograms showed real-time updates from across the sector as human ships hunted down the remaining swarm forces. "You're wondering why we kept this secret," Wilson said, addressing the gathered captains. "Why we let the Federation fight alone for so long." He waved his hand, and the holograms changed to show Earth's solar system 30 years ago. "We detected the swarm long before they reached Federation space," Wilson explained. "Our first deep space probes picked up their quantum signatures. We knew what they were, what they could do, and most importantly, how they evolved." The images showed the swarm's path through the galaxy, their steady advance towards civilized space. Reed watched as data scrolled past, showing how Earth had monitored every swarm adaptation, every new weapon, every evolution in their biomechanical technology. "If we had fought them conventionally," Wilson continued, "they would have adapted. Every victory would have made them stronger. So we chose a different path. We needed weapons they couldn't adapt to, weapons that changed the rules of reality itself." A new hologram appeared, showing the construction of the Thunderchild and its sister ships. Reed saw massive shipyards hidden inside gas giants, research stations buried in dimensional pockets, and testing grounds in spaces between spaces. These ships, Wilson gestured around them, aren't just warships. They're enforcement engines. They don't just fight within the laws of physics. They can locally change those laws. The swarm evolved to be the perfect life form, but they still need the universe to work in predictable ways. We removed that predictability. One of the Federation captains, an older alien with crystalline skin, spoke up. "But why wait? How many lives could have been saved if you had acted sooner?" Wilson's face showed genuine regret. "Because we needed them to commit their full force. The swarm spreads like a virus through the galaxy, leaving hidden nests and dormant spores. We had to wait until they committed everything to this attack. Now we can track their quantum signatures, follow them back to every hidden outpost and sleeping spore." The holograms shifted again, showing human ships appearing near distant stars, striking at hidden swarm bases that even the Federation hadn't known existed. In less than a day, humanity wasn't just winning a battle, they were systematically erasing the swarm from the galaxy. "As we speak," Wilson said, "our ships are cauterizing every swarm infestation in known space. We're not just driving them back, we're ending their threat permanently." Reed thought about the years of terror, the countless lives lost, the worlds left barren by swarm attacks. "What happens after?" he asked. "Will Earth isolate itself again?" Wilson smiled for the first time. "No, that age is over. We've achieved what we needed, a weapon that can defeat the swarm completely. Now it's time for humanity to rejoin the galactic community, to help rebuild what was lost." The gathered captains watched as more holograms appeared, showing plans for joint defense initiatives, technology sharing programs, and reconstruction efforts. Humanity wasn't just offering victory, they were offering a future. As the meeting ended, Reed took one last look around the impossible ship. He realized that humanity hadn't just been hiding all these years, they had been standing guard, preparing for this moment. The hunters who had terrorized the galaxy had become the hunted, and their time had finally run out. The Federation Council chamber buzzed with excited conversation. Representatives from 100 species filled the great hall, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. At the center of the chamber, a human diplomatic team prepared to give their first official presentation to the gathered leaders. Reed sat in the observer section with other ship captains who had witnessed the battle. The Star Wanderer was still under repair, but he had been asked to attend this historic meeting. Next to him, Admiral Wilson watched quietly as the Federation's Supreme Council entered the chamber. The lead human diplomat stepped forward. She was a short woman named Anna Mills, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. The chamber fell silent as she began to speak. "Honored representatives of the Federation," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Today we share with you the full truth of Earth's activities over the past 30 years. She gestured, and holographic images filled the air above the council floor. The images showed Earth as it had been 3 decades ago, when they first detected the swarm. More images appeared, revealing vast underground cities where humans had moved much of their civilization, freeing the surface for massive research and manufacturing facilities. "We did not hide from the galaxy out of fear," Mills continued. "We hid because we needed to transform our entire civilization. Every resource, every breakthrough, every discovery was directed toward a single goal: finding a way to permanently stop the swarm." The holograms showed human scientists working on impossible technologies, testing weapons that bent reality, and building ships that could enforce their will upon space itself. But more importantly, they showed countless surveillance missions, probes sent to monitor the swarm, and detailed analysis of every swarm encounter with other species. We watched. We learned. We saw how the swarm adapted to every weapon used against them. We realized that conventional warfare would never succeed. The more you fought them, the stronger they became. Mills paused, letting the implications sink in. "So we chose a different path." New images appeared, showing the development of the reality-enforcing weapons. Reed recognized the technology that had so completely destroyed the swarm fleet. But now he saw the years of work behind it, the countless failed attempts, the gradual refinement of impossible ideas into working weapons. "Our weapons don't destroy the swarm," Mills explained. "They make it impossible for the swarm to exist. Their greatest strength, their ability to adapt and evolve, becomes meaningless when faced with absolute laws of physics that cannot be broken or adapted to." The Federation Council members whispered among themselves. One of them, a tall being of pure energy, spoke up. "Why did you not share this knowledge? We could have helped." Mills shook her head. The swarm's greatest weapon was information. Every time they fought, they learned. If we had shared our plans, if we had tested our weapons openly, they would have found a way to adapt before we perfected the technology. Secrecy was our shield. The holograms changed again, showing the current status of human ships throughout the galaxy. They were systematically hunting down every trace of the swarm, using their quantum signature detection to find hidden nests and dormant spores. In less than a week, they had accomplished more than the Federation had in years of fighting. But now, Mills smiled, that secrecy is no longer needed. "We come before you not just as warriors who helped defeat an enemy, but as partners in building a safer galaxy." She gestured, and new holograms appeared, showing plans for joint defense systems, shared research initiatives, and cooperative development programs. Reed watched as the Federation Council members began to understand the full scope of what humanity was offering. It wasn't just advanced technology. It was a fundamental change in how the galaxy would defend itself. The Supreme Council leader stood. "You hid your true nature not out of fear, but out of strategy. You watched us suffer, not out of indifference, but because revealing yourselves too soon would have doomed us all to an endless war of adaptation. Mills nodded. Every loss pained us. Every world taken by the swarm made us work harder. But we needed to be certain. We needed to be ready. And now we can finally make things right. The chamber erupted in applause. Reed looked at Wilson, who still watched quietly. Was it worth it? Reed asked. All those years of isolation. Wilson's eyes remained fixed on the celebration below. Ask me again in 100 years, when the children of 100 worlds grow up never knowing the fear of the swarm. 1 month after the swarm's defeat, the Star Wanderer landed at Earth's primary space dock. Reed stood at the viewport, watching other ships arrive from across the Federation. The massive structure orbiting Earth was unlike anything he had seen before. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, parts of it fading in and out of normal space. His ship had been completely repaired with human technology, and now systems he barely understood hummed quietly throughout the vessel. The Federation had accepted Earth's offer of technological assistance, but they were taking it slowly, making sure each advancement was properly understood before moving to the next. Captain, Tom called from his station. You should see this. He pointed to the sensors, which showed a massive ship emerging from a fold in space. It was the Swarm command ship, or what was left of it. Human vessels had recovered it from where it had been scattered across time during the battle. They're bringing it to the research station, Reed explained. Admiral Wilson said they want to study it, make sure no trace of swarm technology can ever threaten the galaxy again. The doors to the bridge opened, and Anna Mills walked in. The human diplomat had specifically requested to tour the Star Wanderer, wanting to see one of the ships that had stood against the swarm before Earth's intervention. Your crew showed remarkable courage, she said, looking around the bridge. Fighting against an enemy you couldn't possibly defeat just to save a few more lives. Reed nodded. We did what we had to do. Though I still wonder how many lives could have been saved if Earth had acted sooner. Mills didn't flinch from the implied criticism. Every day we waited was torture for us. Watching other worlds suffer, staying hidden while the swarm advanced. But we needed them to commit everything. Every ship, every spore, every hidden nest. A partial victory would have been worse than no victory at all. Through the viewport, they watched as more ships arrived. Federation vessels flew alongside human warships, their crews working together to establish new defense networks. The quantum detection systems that had tracked the swarm were being modified to serve as an early warning network for the entire galaxy. The swarm isn't the only threat out there, Mills continued. We detected other things during our isolation. Dangers that could make the swarm look primitive. That's why we're not just sharing weapons. We're sharing knowledge, understanding, ways of thinking that could help all species survive what's coming. A small alert sounded, and Tom looked at his console. They're ready for the ceremony, he announced. Reed, Mills, and the bridge crew made their way to the space dock's main observation deck. Representatives from every Federation species had gathered to witness a historic moment. At the center of the vast room stood Admiral Wilson and the Federation Supreme Council. For 30 years, Wilson began, humanity stood apart from the galaxy. Today we stand together. He pressed a control, and a massive screen showed live feeds from across Federation space. On 100 worlds, human engineers worked alongside Federation scientists, sharing the knowledge they had gained during their long isolation. The Supreme Council leader stepped forward, holding a document that had taken weeks to negotiate. Today we formalize what should have been done long ago. Earth and humanity are hereby granted full membership in the Federation, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Reed watched as Wilson signed the document. As he did, the feeds showed more human ships emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. Not warships this time, but research vessels, exploration ships, and diplomatic craft. Humanity wasn't just joining the Federation. They were fully committing to its future. Captain, Mills said quietly to Reed, your ship's name, Star Wanderer. It's fitting. Humanity wandered away from the galaxy to protect it. Now we can all wander the stars together, safer and stronger than ever before. Outside the observation windows, Earth's defense fleet performed a perfectly choreographed maneuver, their reality-bending drives creating a spectacular display of light and space-time distortion. Federation ships joined in, adding their own traditional formations to the mix. Reed looked at his crew, at the gathered representatives, at the ships dancing among the stars. The galaxy had faced its greatest threat and survived, not through brute force or superior numbers, but through patience, planning, and the determination of a species that had been willing to stand alone in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to light up the sky. "Welcome home," he said to Mills. "Welcome to a bigger galaxy."